He got his dream body. I lost my desire for him. Most women dream of a boyfriend who takes care of himself. I watched mine transform into exactly that, and felt myself go cold. He didn't cheat. He didn't lie. He didn't change his personality. He just changed his body. And something in me shut off. 150 days of early mornings, protein shakes, and dedication. And at the end of it, I looked at the man I love and felt nothing I used to feel. What he said when I finally told him the truth. That's the part I still replay at 2 in the morning. Before I go on, if you've ever loved someone through a version of them you didn't expect, hit subscribe. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I genuinely love knowing where you're watching from. I'm Claire, I'm 23, and this is the story of how my boyfriend became everything the world told him to be, and almost lost me in the process. Ethan and I met during sophomore year of college. Not at a party, not through a dating app. In the university library, 3rd floor, the quiet section where people go when they actually need to focus. He was sitting 2 tables over, highlighter in hand, annotating a textbook like it had personally wronged him. Dark hair, medium build, the kind of guy who looks comfortable in a worn-out hoodie and somehow pulls it off. I was a dance major at the time, or I had been, until I made the decision to switch to pre-med halfway through the year. Dance had been my entire identity since I was 4 years old. Recitals, competitions, summer intensives. But I'd started to realize that I was dancing for the routine of it, not the love of it. And walking away from something that defined you for 19 years doesn't happen quietly. It happens in waves. I was sitting in that library trying to read a biology chapter and failing, because every few minutes my brain would drift back to the studio, the smell of Rosine and hairspray, the sound of a piano warming up, and I'd have to drag myself back to the page. Ethan noticed I'd been staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes. He leaned over, not close enough to be intrusive, and said, "Do you want me to explain it? That chapter's actually interesting once someone breaks it down." And that was it. That was the beginning. We studied together every Tuesday and Thursday for a month before he asked me to dinner. Real dinner, a restaurant, a reservation, not just dining hall food. I remember thinking, this one plans things. This one is intentional. I was right. For almost 4 years, Ethan was the steadiest person in my life. He remembered the small things, the anniversary of the day I left dance, which was hard for me every year, the exact order I like my coffee, the name of the professor who made me cry in the hallway freshman year and still made me tense up when I saw her on campus. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of guy who filled a room. But when you were with him, you felt like the room was the right size. Our relationship had a rhythm. Grocery shopping on Sundays, cooking together on weeknights. He did the proteins, I did the vegetables. We argued about seasoning in a way that never once felt like fighting. Friday nights were for doing absolutely nothing. Blankets on the couch, whatever we'd been meaning to watch for weeks. Takeout from the Thai place 2 blocks away. He was, by every measure I had, exactly what I wanted. Until 6 months ago. It started small. They always do. A gym bag by the front door that hadn't been there before. A new alarm set for 5:45 a.m. 45 minutes earlier than either of us had ever voluntarily woken up. A protein shaker on the kitchen counter, rinsed and drying next to the mugs. I didn't think much of it at first. Ethan had always been active. We both had. Hiking on weekends, the occasional run, yoga, when either of us was stressed. This seemed like more of the same, just dialed up slightly. By month 2, the protein shaker had multiplied. There were now 4 of them, different colors, lined up on the second shelf like soldiers. The pantry had reorganized itself. Where there used to be pasta and crackers, and the particular brand of chips Ethan liked, there were now tubs of whey, containers of creatine, bags of rice cakes, and a jar of peanut butter powder that I didn't know existed before and still don't fully understand. He started cooking separate meals. That was the moment I noticed something had changed, not just in habit, but in priority. We'd always cooked together. It was one of our things. But now Ethan had a food scale on the counter and a spreadsheet on his phone logging his macros, and what he needed to eat didn't match what I needed to eat. So he'd make his portion, weighed out to the gram, and I'd make mine, and we'd sit at the same table eating different meals. It sounds like a small thing. It felt like a small thing. I told myself it was a small thing. By month 4, it was no longer small. I came home from a long shift at the hospital where I was doing my pre-med rotations, exhausted in the specific way that bone-deep fatigue feels. Not just tired, but hollowed out. I walked in expecting Ethan on the couch. Instead, I found a note on the counter. At the gym. Back by 8. Leftovers in the fridge. Your portion's the one on the left. The fact that he'd labeled them was thoughtful. I knew that. I stood in the kitchen holding the note, and I thought, he's trying to be considerate. But I also thought, he's been gone more hours this week than he's been home. When he came back that night, he was different in a way I couldn't articulate yet. Not in personality. He kissed me hello, asked about my day, listened when I answered. But physically, something had compounded. He'd taken off his jacket, and I registered, somewhere below the level of language, that the person standing in my kitchen had a different silhouette than the one I'd kissed goodbye that morning. His shoulders were wider, his arms, which had always been on the leaner side, the arms of someone who moves through the world rather than someone who lifts things, were not that anymore. I told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't. I need to say something here before I go further, because I know how this sounds. I know that women are supposed to be grateful when their partners take care of themselves. I know that attraction to a muscular man is considered the standard, the obvious preference, the given. I know there are approximately 1 million social media posts, magazine covers, and movie trailers telling me that what Ethan was becoming is the ideal. I also know what I was feeling, and what I was feeling was the opposite of attraction. The best way I've ever been able to describe it, he used to look like Loki, now he looks like Thor. And I know, that sounds like I'm insane. Thor is objectively handsome. Thor is what most people mean when they say attractive. But there's something about Loki, the lean lines, the dark looks, the sense that intelligence is doing more work than muscle, that had always done something for me. That had always been, specifically and privately, my thing. Ethan had been my Loki, and I was watching him become someone I didn't have that response to. Our sex life, which had been genuinely good, comfortable, and easy in the way long relationships build toward, started to change. Not in frequency at first, but in quality, in connection. I'd look at him and feel something close to performance anxiety, which had never been part of our dynamic. He'd take off his shirt, and instead of seeing Ethan, I'd see a version of the images I'd spent years scrolling past without interest. The aesthetic that gets a million likes, but has never personally moved me. I kept waiting for my brain to recalibrate. I kept thinking, you know this person, you love this person, your body will catch up. It didn't catch up. The intimacy outside of sex started to suffer too, and that was actually harder to sit with. Cuddling, which sounds like a small thing, but is, for me, one of the primary ways I feel close to someone, got uncomfortable. The weight of him was different. The feel of being held was different. I felt like I was lying next to a stranger wearing my boyfriend's face, and I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't tell him. I smiled. I gave him the same compliments I always had. I said the right things when he mentioned his progress. I was, by every external measure, supportive. Inside, I was quietly panicking. I want to stop here for a second, because I've told this to a few people, and the reactions have been split. Some people immediately understood. They nodded before I even finished the sentence. They had a Loki preference too, or an equivalent, some specific type that doesn't match the cultural default, and they've spent years slightly apologizing for it. Other people looked at me like I'd said something in a language they didn't speak. Like the idea that a woman might not be attracted to a muscular man was a category error. So I want to ask you, have you ever been with someone whose physical appearance shifted significantly, not through neglect, but through dedication, and found yourself on the wrong side of the change? Tell me in the comments. I'll read every single one. Because what I was dealing with wasn't just a preference. It was the question underneath the preference. Do I have the right to feel this way? And what do I do with it if I do? Here's the thing about Ethan's transformation that nobody around me wanted to talk about. I wasn't just unattracted to the aesthetic. I was worried about him. I understand fitness. My entire adolescence was structured around physical discipline, the kind that dance demands, which is more rigorous than most people realize. I know what it looks like when someone is training for love of movement versus training for a result. I know the difference between a body that is healthy and a body that is optimized. Ethan's body was optimizing. The dedication to keeping his body fat as low as possible. The way cardio had essentially disappeared from his routine because it might interfere with muscle gain. The way our conversations about food, which used to be one of my favorite kinds of conversations to have with him, had reduced to him reporting numbers. Grams of protein, caloric surplus, macro ratios. I'd read enough in my pre-med rotations to know that extreme muscle gain, particularly rapid gain, isn't always the uncomplicated health when it gets presented as. That more mass means more demand on your cardiovascular system. That the pursuit of a specific physique and the pursuit of longevity are not always the same journey. I didn't say this to Ethan. I didn't want to be the person pathologizing his choices, especially when I couldn't fully separate my worry from my discomfort with the aesthetic. But the worry was real, and it was making everything worse, because now I had two things I wasn't saying. I'm not attracted to you the way I used to be, and I'm scared about where this is going. And in the space between what I was feeling and what I was saying, something in our relationship started to quietly compress. It was a Tuesday, ordinary in every way that matters. I came home to find Ethan doing pull-ups in the doorframe of our bedroom. He'd installed a bar 2 months ago, another thing I'd cataloged without fully registering. He was shirtless. He finished his set, dropped down, turned around, smiled at me, and I smiled back. And then I went into the bathroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and had a very quiet, very private moment of reckoning. Because the smile was real. The love behind it was real. But the flutter that used to come with it, the physical response that had always been automatic with him, that I'd never had to manufacture, wasn't there. And I realized I'd been manufacturing it for 2 months. I'd been performing attraction to the person I actually loved, which is one of the lonelier experiences I've ever had. Because it looks exactly like everything being fine, and it feels like lying to your closest person every single day. I sat on that bathtub for a long time. Then I washed my face, went back out, and helped make dinner. And while we ate, his weighed portion, my regular one, I looked at him across the table and thought, I have to tell him something. Not everything, not yet, but something. The question was how. I need to ask you something, because I sat with this for weeks before I said a word. If you were in my position, if the person you loved had changed in a way that was diminishing your physical attraction, and they hadn't done anything wrong, would you tell them? Or would you decide that some things are yours to carry alone? Because there are 2 arguments, and I understood both of them. 1, honesty is the foundation. If you can't tell your partner something this basic about your experience, what are you actually building together? 2, there are things you feel that your partner doesn't need to know. Attraction fluctuates. You work through it privately and come out the other side. Saying it out loud only causes pain. Tell me which side you're on in the comments. Because what I decided, and how Ethan responded, I didn't expect, not even a little. I chose a Sunday morning, not because it was planned, but because Sunday mornings had always been ours in a particular way. Slow, unhurried, coffee before anything else. It was the time in our week when we were most ourselves. He was standing at the kitchen counter, measuring out his breakfast. I was sitting at the table with my mug, watching him, and I said, Can I tell you something that's going to be hard to say? He set down the measuring cup, turned around. His face did something careful. Yeah, he said. Of course. I took a breath, and I told him the truth, or a version of it. Not the full internal monologue, not the months of cataloging and performing and sitting on bathtub edges, but the core of it. I love you. I love who you are. And I've been noticing that since you started training differently, something in my physical response to you has changed. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because I don't want to keep pretending everything is exactly the same when it isn't, and because I think you deserve to know. Silence. He didn't fill it immediately, which is one of the things I've always respected about him. Ethan doesn't react. He processes. I watched his face move through something, not anger, but something that looked like it was deciding whether to become anger or something else. Then he said, How long have you been feeling this way? A couple of months. Another pause. Why didn't you tell me sooner? And that was the question, wasn't it? The exact question. Because I kept thinking I'd recalibrate, I said. Because I didn't want to be the person who makes you feel bad for taking care of yourself. Because I didn't fully know how to say it. He nodded slowly. Then he turned back to the counter, picked up his measuring cup, set it back down again, looked at the window. I need to think, he said. He thought for 3 days. Not in a punishing way. He wasn't cold. He wasn't distant. He was just clearly inside something he was working through. He came home from the gym, he made his meals, he asked about my day. But he was processing in the particular quiet way he does when something has landed somewhere deep. On the third day, he came and sat across from me at the kitchen table. Same table we'd been sharing for 4 years, eating our different meals at. He said, "Can I tell you why I started?" And I realized, sitting there, that I hadn't asked. In 6 months of protein shakers and gym bags and 5:45 alarms, I had never once directly asked him what had changed and why. I felt something shift in my chest. "Yes," I said. "Please." He folded his hands on the table, looked at them for a moment. "You know I'm finishing my degree in 3 months." I nodded. "I've been thinking about what comes after, a lot. More than I've said out loud." He paused. "My dad had his first cardiac event at 52. His dad had his at 48. I don't talk about it much, but I think about it constantly. I think about what I'm giving myself long-term, not just what I look like short-term. I hadn't known about his grandfather. In 4 years, I hadn't known that." He kept going. "And I won't pretend there wasn't another part of it." He looked up at me. "I've been thinking about asking you something, an important question, and I wanted to feel like, I don't know, like I was the best version of myself when I asked." The kitchen was very quiet. I understood then what he was saying without him saying it. "Ethan." "I'm not telling you that to make you feel guilty," he said quickly. "I'm telling you because you asked, and I want us to be the kind of people who tell each other the real reasons, even when they're embarrassing." I sat there looking at the man across from me. The man I had been telling myself looked like a stranger for 2 months. He didn't look like a stranger. He looked like Ethan, who had listened to me grieve a dance career I'd walked away from, who labeled the leftovers so I'd know which was mine, who apparently had been training for something that had nothing to do with how he looked, and everything to do with how long he intended to be here. I started crying. Quietly. The kind of crying that doesn't announce itself. "I should have asked sooner," I said. "I should have told you sooner," he said. We sat there for a while in the particular silence of 2 people who have just handed each other something real. I want to be honest with you about where things are now, because I don't want to give you a resolution that's tidier than the truth. My attraction to Ethan hasn't fully reset. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that one conversation fixed everything, because it didn't. Some of what I'm dealing with is physical preference, and preference doesn't reroute overnight because you learned something important about the person you love. But here's what has changed. When I look at him now, I don't see Thor anymore. Or I do. But behind Thor, I can see Ethan, working through the math of his own mortality, lacing up his shoes at 5:45 in the morning, not because of vanity, but because of fear. Fear of a specific number, 52, 48, fear of becoming a statistic in his own family history. That is not unattractive to me. That is actually one of the most intimate things I have ever learned about another person. We've started talking about it more. He told me about his grandfather. I told him about my dance trauma, the way intensive physical training had become complicated for me. Something about watching someone else pour themselves into their body had activated feelings I hadn't fully processed. He listened in the way he always listens, like what you're saying is the thing worth paying attention to. We're not cooking separate meals anymore. He still tracks his macros, but he does it on his phone instead of with a scale on the counter. He says it's not a big difference. I know it cost him something to offer it, and I haven't pretended otherwise. I don't know if he's going to ask me that important question. He hasn't yet. After our conversation, things felt tender enough that timing something like that would have required a particular kind of courage I think we both needed to rebuild toward. But I know this. I want to be there when he does. If you're watching this and you've felt something like what I felt, attraction shifting in a long relationship, the guilt of it, the confusion of loving someone and not being able to locate your desire for them, I want to say something that nobody said to me. That feeling doesn't make you a bad partner. Attraction in long relationships isn't a constant. It's a living thing. It responds to context and history and what you know about a person. Sometimes it needs information it doesn't have yet. What I almost did, and what I think would have been the real mistake, was let the silence continue. Let the performance of attraction replace the real thing indefinitely. Drift away from someone I loved because I was too afraid of hurting him to tell him the truth. Honesty, Even uncomfortable honesty, even honesty that you're ashamed of, is almost always the beginning of something. Silence is almost always the beginning of an ending. I had a preference that didn't match his new body. That was real. And underneath it was a man I didn't fully know yet, even after 4 years. Which is the thing about long relationships. They're not something you finish. They're something you keep discovering. Ask the question, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The answer might be the thing that saves you. I'm Claire. I'm 23. And I'm still figuring out how to love someone across the distance of who they're becoming. If this story reached something in you, if it reminded you of a conversation you've been avoiding, or a feeling you haven't named yet, leave a comment. I read everyone. If you know someone who needs to hear that they're allowed to feel complicated things in a relationship they love, share this with them. And hit subscribe so you're here for the next one. Because my next story, it's about a woman who found out her husband had been living a double life, not with another woman, with an entirely different family, in the same city. She didn't find out the way you'd expect. I'll see you there.